On this Monday night, what could be the most consequential decision of Donald Trump's presidency? The nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. What will a solid conservative majority mean for the court, the United States, and beyond? And does it really mean abortion rights are doomed? Why the impact of this nomination will likely be felt long after Trump leaves office.
Also tonight, what the loss of Greyhound bus service means for small communities in Western Canada. And rescuers in Thailand are preparing for another high-risk operation to free the 4 boys and their coach still inside that cave. What we know about the team that has captured the world's attention. This is The National.
Donald Trump put on a big show tonight. He once again used his command of primetime television to tease out his nomination of a new Supreme Court justice. That choice is one of the greatest powers a president has to shape his country, and Trump clearly treasured the moment.
Tonight, it is my honor and privilege to announce that I will nominate Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court.
My judicial philosophy is straightforward. A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law.
Get ready to hear that theme a lot. Trump's critics may see him as stacking the court with another conservative, but supporters will argue he is reining in activist judges and protecting the intent of the Constitution's framers. So Brett Kavanaugh beat out 24 others on a list of candidates that the White House compiled with the help of stridently right-wing groups like the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Here's what we know about Trump's top court pick. Brett Kavanaugh clerked for the retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. The Yale-educated judge is best known for his ties to 2 past presidents, helping investigate Bill Clinton and later as a top aide to George W. Bush.
I, Brett M. Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh has some strong ties to Washington. He was born in D.C. and draws support from establishment Republicans.
I believe my White House experience made me a more knowledgeable judge, certainly, and also a more independent judge.
But as a judge, conservative critics argue Kavanaugh didn't go far enough in his decisions on Obamacare and abortion-related cases. Our Paul Hunter is standing by at the White House. And Paul, you know, a serious political fight still to come over this nominee. What actually comes next?
Yeah, well, now the fight begins. Trump's nominee needs to be confirmed by a majority of votes in the Senate, and for the moment, Republicans control the majority of votes in the Senate, if only just. So here we go.
To be clear, it's Donald Trump who nominates, but it's the U.S. Senate that turns thumbs up or down on the next Supreme Court justice.
Enormously important issues hang in the balance.
And today, even before Trump's pick tonight, the battling had begun. Democrats, with their worry that Trump's new nominee will, if confirmed, work to undermine Obamacare and reverse U.S. laws on abortion rights. So when they get a chance to ask, as they will, they'll want answers.
The next nominee has an obligation, a serious and solemn obligation, to share their personal views on these legal issues.
The goal for Democrats is to persuade even 1 or 2 Republicans to vote no, with an eye to pressing Trump for a more centrist second choice, all the while reminding voters in the looming midterm elections of what's at stake.
We've seen the same movie time after time.
Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who, by the way, blocked Barack Obama's final Supreme Court pick in 2016, today slammed Democrats for always pushing back on Republican choices.
No matter their qualifications, no matter their record, no matter their reputation, it's the same hyperbole, the same accusations, the same old story.
He wants the best of the best on the Supreme Court.
Meanwhile, the ad war is underway. This one from a conservative group looking for all the world like an election-style attack ad targets Democrats.
Like they did before, extremists will lie and attack the nominee. But don't be fooled. President Trump's list includes the best of the best,
Liberal groups counter with this reminder. Trump has long said he wants a judge who will end abortions. Senator Collins, name-checked at the bottom, is Susan Collins, a Republican who champions abortion rights. A swayable vote. Maybe. All of it, highlighting what the confirmation process here has become. Yes, you need a strong legal pedigree, but, says a former clerk for Anthony Kennedy, whose pending retirement opened the door for tonight, views on those divisive issues matter.
They need to be capable and qualified and intellectually up to the task. But in addition, I think both the public, certainly, and the president is expecting some certainty about their predilections on these particular cases.
So, Paul, in that you mentioned the coming midterms, how much of a factor is this kind of thing in energizing voters?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. If nothing else, it will remind voters on both sides of the stakes in this. The president chooses, but the Senate confirms. So in shaping the Supreme Court, control of the Senate is crucial. So that should energize voters in both parties. But it's worth noting that historically, it's energized Republican voters a lot more than it's energized Democrats. It's one of the reasons Donald Trump resides in the White House. Republicans who may have had issues with certain aspects of candidate Trump were willing to set that aside because of the value they saw in ensuring a Republican president to ensure nights like tonight. We'll see how it plays out this fall.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Paul Hunter in Washington. So the mere mention of a new Supreme Court nominee in the U.S. often sparks panic that a new face will seismically shift the country. And there's a lot of anxiety now that big issues, same-sex marriage, affirmative action, abortion rights, all will suddenly be on shaky ground. Most of the talk is about Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 case that effectively made abortion legal throughout the U.S. And some analysts are downright dire in their predictions of what's next.
You are going to see 20 states pass laws banning abortion outright. And Roe v. Wade is doomed. It is gone because Donald Trump won the election.
It's a pretty extraordinary thing to say. So the question is he right? Are abortion rights doomed? As always in life and law, it's complicated. The Supreme Court sees a small number of cases each year, usually fewer than 85. Most of the country's legal battles play out in the lower courts. Once a case has gone through those courts, it can be appealed to the Supreme Court. To overturn a decision like Roe v. Wade, a case involving abortion would need to make it to the Supreme Court level.
This notion that suddenly abortion is going to be outlawed overnight or that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned immediately is, I would say, not founded in the reality of the Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade has been challenged at the Supreme Court before. In 1992, it was upheld, so abortion remained legal. That new ruling allowed states, though, to impose some restrictions, like insisting a minor needs parental consent for an abortion. Some states went further. 45 states allow individual health care providers to refuse to do abortions. Mississippi banned abortions after 15 weeks. That particular ban is interesting. It has been challenged in the lower courts, as have abortion restrictions in several other states. Those are precisely the challenges that might just make it to the Supreme Court, but still, that could take years.
When I ran for office, I pledged to stand for life. And as president, that's exactly what I've done.
Trump's influence extends well beyond the Supreme Court. Timing and a few careful political moves by Republicans have put him in a position to appoint more lower court judges than Clinton or Bush, and he has more than double the vacancies Obama had. That could have a major influence on abortion at the state level.
These judges who are on these lower courts are going to be deciding whether or not particular state regulations of abortion are constitutional, are okay, essentially. We are going to have probably quite some period of time where the lower courts are deciding this issue before the Supreme Court decides to enter the fray.
So technically, Roe v. Wade may remain in place at least for a while, but for American women, depending on where they live, their access to abortions may indeed get a lot more difficult.
Here's what else we're working on tonight on The National. Greyhound cancels nearly all its routes in Western Canada. What that means for rural and vulnerable people.
And Canada extends its mission in Latvia. So what are troops doing in the Baltic nation?
But first, rescuers in Thailand celebrate stunning successes so far, but there is still a long road ahead. It is Tuesday morning in Chiang Rai, and currently 5 people are still inside. More than half of a boys' soccer team has been rescued from those caves in northern Thailand, and it has been a harrowing operation. 4 more boys and their coach are now waiting to make that difficult journey out. Oxygen levels in the cave are low. Bad weather is looming. Briar Stewart is in Thailand near the staging area, not far from the caves.
Every time an ambulance goes by with its lights flashing, followed by a helicopter overhead, there's a sense of anticipation. The sequence of events has come to mean another boy has made it out of the cave. And on Monday, another 4 were rescued. They were taken to the hospital to join their 4 teammates on a floor set aside just for them. All have to stay in isolation at first, which means emotional family reunions will have to wait. The boys are said to be doing well. A few even asked for a special Thai basil chicken dish, but officials say they aren't getting that yet. Their menu includes simple food like porridge. Officials haven't released the names of the 8 boys who were rescued, and some of the relatives have said even they haven't been told anything. By all accounts, though, the coach is still underground, sitting on that rocky ledge with the remaining 4 players. 25-year-old Ekapol Chatawong was once ordained as a monk, and his aunt says the boys' families trust him. He loves kids very much, she says. He's a very good person. He takes care of kids, very diligent. Not far from the entrance to the cave lies the community of Mesai, where a number of the boys go to school. 14-year-old Katana is friends with some of them. Many Thai people have been working to rescue the boys, he says, and help their families. The next rescue attempt is set to begin in the coming hours after the divers have rested and refueled. The teams have led the boys out of the cave faster than expected because the water levels have stayed low. This has made it easier for them to get out. Danish diver Ivan Karadzik says one of the biggest challenges in the cave is communication.
Well, one of the very difficult things in the cave is talking. You need to be very close. If you're more than just 5-10 meters away, the echo and the water and everything, it's incredibly hard to understand.
But what's different today is that all the rain they had predicted and feared has arrived. So officials will be watching the water level inside the cave very closely when they start the next and possibly final rescue. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Chiang Rai.
The team went into this cave together, but of course now they've been separated, some in hospital, some awaiting rescue. As David Common reports, we're getting a better picture of who they are and how they have been supporting each other.
When the boys stepped off their bikes and out of their shoes at the cave entrance 2 weeks ago, it was Firapat Sompiangai's 16th birthday, night to his friends. The team reportedly entered the cave in part to celebrate and brought snacks for an impromptu party, snacks which helped sustain them.
How many of you? 13. Brilliant.
That now famous reply came from 14-year-old Adul Samon, the only English speaker. Although officials won't name who the first 4 to be rescued were, 13-year-old Mark is said to be one of them, along with 14-year-olds Tern, Nick, who wrote to his parents that he wants to go for Thai barbecue, and Note, whose grandmother has maintained a vigil for him.
Grandma loves you the most in the whole world. I miss you dearly.
13-year-old Dom is the team's biggest motivator on the pitch and may well have played that role underground. Same age is Pong, who dreams of playing in Thailand's national team. In a letter to the outside, Mig said the SEAL team takes very good care of us. T told his parents, don't worry. 14-year-old Bu wrote to his mother promising to help in her shop if he makes it out. Titan at 11 is the youngest. That leaves only the 25-year-old coach Ak. As much as many may blame him for taking the boys in, The former monk and an orphan himself has reportedly helped the boys meditate to stay calm. But he was the weakest, apparently insisting the boys eat what food they had left until rescue came. David Common, CBC News, Toronto.
Officials say the reason why they've been so tight-lipped about who's been rescued is out of respect for the families whose sons are still trapped inside. But here's what we do know about how officials decided who should be removed first. On Sunday, officials said the strongest boys would be selected first, but ultimately the governor said the final decision would be up to a doctor inside the cave and the boys themselves. Even some parents desperate for news about their children say they're being kept in the dark, told to stay away from the hospital. When they do get to see the rescued kids, it could first be through a glass partition. No hugging or touching, because officials say there's the risk of infection spreading from parents to the boys. After 2 weeks in a damp cave with almost no food or water, their immune systems are weakened. They'll be undergoing tests in isolation to check for dehydration, malnutrition, and diseases before they're released. And here's a live look at the area near the entrance of that cave in Chiang Rai, already Tuesday morning in Thailand. And we'll be bringing you updates from officials as we wait for word that the next operation to retrieve those 4 remaining boys and their coach gets underway. And there are other developing stories that we're watching tonight, including the race to find survivors in Japan after the worst flooding there in decades. The skies did clear today after days of torrential rain, but the number of dead continues to climb as crews searched communities hit by floods and landslides. So far, 103 people have been confirmed dead and dozens are still unaccounted for. Many areas in western Japan are still out of reach after flooding shut down railways and highways. And we're keeping an eye on the looming deadline for the U.S. government. It has just under 24 hours to reunite migrant children under the age of 5 with their families after being separated at the border. But that court-ordered deadline likely won't be met. Federal officials said today that by the end of tomorrow, they'll only be able to reunite about half of the 102 children. One issue, some parents have already been deported. And we are watching for developments in northern Ontario where a forest fire has led to a state of emergency. It's happening in Temagami, about 160 kilometers northeast of Sudbury. A mandatory evacuation order is in place for some people. Others have been told to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Right now, the fire not yet under control.
Still ahead on the National, hundreds of jobs, hundreds of thousands of people, what the end of Greyhound service in Western Canada means for small communities.
Plus, is Brexit on the brink? A third minister leaves the British government today over the pending EU exit plan.
And a birthday party for kids who might not usually get an invitation. The moment some hope has just become a movement.
I think once everybody started realizing how much need there was for kids to actually have this party to help build up their self-worth, people just started chipping in and helping. I had volunteers messaging me every week. I had acts and performers messaging me.
A major shift tonight in how thousands of people will be moving around in the country. Greyhound announcing today that it's ending bus service in Western Canada, except for a single route between Vancouver and Seattle. Now, the cuts take effect in October. The company blaming a dwindling number of passengers, down 41% since 2010. But still, there are a lot of people in this country who rely on Greyhound. More than 1 million passengers in Canada would be affected. British Columbia hardest hit with an average of 650,000 passengers taking Greyhound per year. That's followed by Alberta with 380,000, and then Northern Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan. For many, especially in remote communities, it's more than an inconvenience. Rafi Bouchikanian spoke to some of them today.
A few months from now, this scene could be a thing of the past in Western Canada. Greyhound blames declining rural ridership, but these riders say that's not their experience.
The Prairie Provinces uses the Greyhound service extensively for work and travel and people that are, like I said, limited to mobility. It just doesn't make sense.
The skepticism echoed by towns that rely on Greyhound.
I don't buy it that Greyhound, is facing all these challenges. They could have downsized the fleet.
Greyhound pulled out of northern British Columbia this year, leaving the province to take on transport on a stretch of Highway 16 known as the Highway of Tears, where many Indigenous women and girls have gone missing. Safety a big concern now for other Indigenous communities.
When you want to make decisions that actually impact people's lives, you can't come from it from a purely economic standpoint. You have to realize that over the course of time, people have become dependent on the service that you provide.
As for Saskatchewan, it didn't completely rely on Greyhound until last year. That's when it shut down the provincially subsidized Saskatchewan Transportation Company. Now, riders like Deborah Watney are scrambling for alternatives. She often shuttles between Edmonton and her home reserve of Canoe Lake, Saskatchewan.
And it's going to be hard for me to go back and forth. I don't know, and I don't have a license. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that.
For its part, Greyhound says it's sorry about the decision, but points the finger at elected officials.
We apologize for the inconvenience this is going to cause for the people after October 31st. And I think that it's important to speak out to your local politicians about the need for the service and the need for a long-term sustainable plan.
And it's not just passengers left stranded. More than 400 Greyhound employees expect come the end of October, they'll be unemployed. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
For years, Greyhound has said it's advocated for a community funding model so it could continue serving rural areas. But in an email to CBC Today, Transport Canada said in part, there are no federal government funding programs that would provide an operational subsidy for private intercity bus carriers, as there has not been a requirement for such programs. Individual provinces can subsidize specific routes, and after Greyhound cut service in northern BC, the province went one step further and launched a long-haul bus service of its own. As of last month, BC Bus North has been operating between a number of northern communities, and those include Fort Nelson, Dawson Creek, Prince George and Prince Rupert, the so-called Highway of Tears, and Valemont. But the government says the service is just an interim measure while it explores a long-term solution.
Next on The National, we know tonight's pick has the potential to change the cultural and legal landscape south of the border, but what does Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee mean for this country? We break it down with our expert panel right after this.
When I looked out, I just seen all this fog. I thought it was until I got up and opened my door and realized it was a fire.
Here's what we're watching tonight on The National. A frightening day in a St. John's suburb. The forest fire coming so close to a subdivision that it scorched the siding on 11 homes and destroyed several patios. The area was evacuated. Water bombers deployed to fight the fire back. Officials say it is now under control and residents are back home, but they've been asked to watch for any remaining hotspots. Another company says it will stop using disposable plastic straws. Starbucks says it plans to get rid of them from all of its worldwide locations by 2020, replacing them with new strawless lids and straws made from other materials. Just last month, McDonald's said it was switching to paper straws at its UK and Irish locations, and that it planned to test alternatives at some of its U.S. locations.
Ground, there's DeGrasse, and Andre pulls up.
A tough weekend for Olympic sprinter Andre DeGrasse. He injured his hamstring Saturday at the Canadian Track and Field Championships, and he confirmed in a statement today that he is out for the rest of the season. You'll remember this is the second time in less than a year that DeGrasse has been sidelined by a hamstring injury. And it is official, Canadian pop star Justin Bieber has confirmed on Instagram that he is engaged. His fiancée is model Hailey Baldwin. She's the niece of actor Alec Baldwin. Bieber confirmed he popped the question on Saturday. The pair reportedly in the Bahamas at the time.
I do not ask about a nominee's personal opinions. What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require. I am pleased to say that I have found, without doubt, such a person.
Well, there you go. That was Donald Trump tonight trumpeting his latest nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court. And the president's introduction notwithstanding, Brett Kavanaugh was clearly chosen with an eye to adding conservative heft to the bench. So the question tonight, what will be the impact on people in the United States and even here in Canada? Our expert panel follows the court very closely. Mark Joseph Stern is the legal affairs correspondent with Slate magazine. He's in Washington, right in the heart of the action. Christine Harrington is a professor of politics at New York University. She is also in Washington tonight. And Elie Mystal is the executive editor of AboveTheLaw.com. He joins us from New York. And Elie, I feel compelled to start with you. I know you're not one to mince words, so, have at it. What is your gut instinct about the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh?
Yeah, this is the worst of all possible worlds, right? I will leave it to Kavanaugh's former clerk, who said that if a president was interested in overturning Roe, there could be no better choice than Brett Kavanaugh. So let's start there. Roe and abortion rights in America are clearly under threat as of now. But I think this pick was made not actually as a litmus test for abortion rights. I think the litmus test here is that Kavanaugh has written extensively and powerfully, basically saying that the president cannot be indicted while he's the president. Obviously, Donald Trump is under, 8,000 different kinds of investigations, and Kavanaugh is the guy who's going to say, no, Robert Mueller, you cannot indict a sitting president, and that's probably the fifth vote that Trump needs to hang on to his job. So I think that, as usual, Trump was more self-interested than ideological with this pick.
Boy, Elie, I wish you'd speak your mind. Mark, you seem a little pensive. What do you think?
I generally agree with Ellie's assessment. I would add that this is great news for deregulators in the Trump White House. One of the chief goals of the Trump administration has been to deregulate the banking industry, the energy industry, the financial industry, as much as possible. And Brett Kavanaugh is extremely skeptical of regulatory power broadly and also of the bureaucrats in D.C. who are tasked with implementing regulations. He has voted repeatedly to strike down laws maintaining the independence of agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He has voted to strike down regulations limiting pollution and fossil fuels. He is a quote-unquote pro-business, anti-regulation choice, and that is going to make a huge faction of the Republican Party extremely happy this evening.
Christine, given everything we're hearing here, is this a lock? I mean, we are talking about this as if it is a done deal, but is there a chance that Brett Kavanaugh could actually have a hard time in the confirmation hearing?
Well, if we pay attention to what the opposition has talked about, there could possibly be some rough going. Not so much in the hearings, but rather the backroom dickering with other members of the Senate, particularly, of course, the two women senators who have expressed support for women's reproductive privacy and may or may not support this nominee given his record, as Eli noted. On the matter of deregulation, I'm afraid the Republicans will be just, rolling over and thrilled, as Mark has already pointed out.
Okay, so I, as an outsider here, I know people have been hanging on the name, but it just seems in a way that you're talking about different degrees of conservatism here. Does the fact that it's actually Brett Kavanaugh actually matter? Mark?
Well, I think all of the top shortlist candidates were definitely very conservative. I think that Kavanaugh is about as far to the right as you could get. Arguably, another shortlister, Amy Coney Barrett, was even farther to the right. But Kavanaugh has this staunchly conservative record that will please and appease as many Republicans as you could hope for. I mean, in addition to deregulation, as Ellie said, he's clearly anti-abortion. He wrote this very condescending, paternalistic decision allowing the government to block an undocumented minor from terminating her pregnancy. He's extremely pro-gun. He would have struck down laws here in the District of Columbia that limit private citizens' access to assault weapons. He's almost certainly going to oppose marriage equality and gay rights under an originalist view of the Constitution. So I think it does matter because there were candidates on that shortlist like Tom Hardiman, who currently sits on the Third Circuit, who were a little bit more of an unknown there and who might have had some room to drift to the left a bit, to have a more moderate vote. Kavanaugh is, he can be a bomb thrower. He's very, very far to the right. He's not afraid to tone it down, or he doesn't want to tone it down. He's not afraid to stay as far out there as he wants so he can get results for the right-wing cause that he so obviously supports.
Ellie, how you doing?
Yeah, I think Mark's right. Like, look, you're right. There were all there. If you care about rights, whether they be civil or gender equality, they were all bad choices. But Kavanaugh has a particular way of, he does one thing, for instance, that I really cannot stand as a journalist. He believes in what a lot of people call weaponized free speech. That means that somehow your speech, if you're kind of saying the right conservative things, becomes more important than somebody else's right to not be discriminated against. And I think that's, so like, there are different ways, let's take gay rights. There are different ways of crushing gay rights that don't do as much damage as Kavanaugh will do when he basically decides that homophobia is free speech. He's going to twist things in a certain way that's going to make it kind of particularly painful to watch these decisions that, as Mark says, all four of these shortlisters probably would have come down on the same size. The way Kavanaugh's going to get there is going to be real gross.
So, I mean, we're watching this as Canadians here, as your neighbors, and I know we could fall down the rabbit hole of analyzing American politics and the impact on Americans, but a lingering curiosity here is we know that the border is porous politically, socially, culturally. So if we can start with each one of you, what's your instinct about what the impact might be on a country like this one? Christine?
Well, I think in terms of expanding executive power with this nominee and solidifying more authority in the executive branch, that will have impact, not just for Canada, but elsewhere, and of course, clearly here within the United States. I think that the comments that we've already heard regarding his dismissal of the idea that a sitting president can be indicted bode pretty scary with respect to restraints that can be placed on this president, such as the ongoing Mueller investigation, as well as other types of activity. And that's not just this nominee, but we had a hint of that in the Muslim ban decision that just was affirmed, surprisingly, by the Supreme Court, with the view that a reasonable president may be able to ban based on national security, despite the reality of the remarks, the racist remarks that Trump has made about Muslims. So in terms of restraining, checking the executive, that's not in the cards here. And we saw a bit of that, of course, in the Muslim ban, but the direction of this nominee and the leadership he may take in partnership with Alito, Justice Alito in particular, will be moving it further in the direction of there being no judicial check.
All right, all of you, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there's been a lot of discussion about abortion tonight, and there's a reason for that. It's because the United States public is deeply divided over abortion. The most recent Gallup polling from early May shows that 48% identify as pro-choice. 48% identify as pro-life. That's the language used in the polling. Half continue to say abortion should be legal in some circumstances, but slightly more respondents say abortion is morally wrong than those who say it's morally acceptable.
More to come tonight on The National, but first, for the first time in Canada, Facebook is opening itself up for translation into an Indigenous language. And in honor of Nunavut Day, July 9th, here's a look at some of the efforts taken to preserve that very language.
Welcome, Nunavut.
That was 25 years ago when the Canadian government passed a law leading to the creation of the country's third territory, and that day is marked by celebrations. For Aluki Kutik, the legal representative of the Inuit in Nunavut, it's a chance to highlight efforts to strengthen the Inuktitut language.
Inuktitut is declining at 1% per year, which might not sound like a lot. But if we continue at that rate, by 2051, only 4% of us will be speaking Inuktitut in our homes.
Facebook is hoping to help change that. The social media platform is starting the process of making some settings accessible in Inuktitut. The translation will only be available in Roman letters, not the syllabic writing system. So instead of the like button, Facebook users will soon be clicking on this by next year.
Many Inuit have social media accounts. And because it's so expensive to fly from each of our communities, it makes it even more important that we're able to have that connectivity.
Facebook doesn't have the capacity to translate words to Inuktitut, so it's asking users for help. Something the CBC TV's Eagle Act newscast knows well. Its host live translates from English to Inuktitut every night.
They can turn their radios on and listen to the English news, but being able to hear it in Inuktitut makes all the more difference for them, so it's vital in each of our communities.
From the smiles, you'd never know the British government was thrust into chaos today. Prime Minister Theresa May welcomed the Austrian Chancellor to 10 Downing Street as the future of Brexit and even her own government suddenly became unclear with the resignation of two high-profile cabinet ministers. Their departure comes just days before a critical NATO summit and a visit to the UK by President Trump. Susan Ormiston has been following the political whirlwind from our London bureau.
This could be Boris Johnson's most audacious zipline act. A fierce Brexit supporter, the flamboyant Foreign Secretary suddenly quit over the Prime Minister's plan to exit Europe. Curiously, he remained hidden inside his government residence today, sending out only stinging words. The Brexit dream, he wrote, is dying, suffocated by needless self-doubt. May's plan gives up too much to Europe, truly heading Britain toward the status of colony.
What we are proposing is challenging for the EU. It requires them...
A wounded Theresa May faced howling opposition, particularly from the Labour leader.
Mr. Speaker, how can anyone have faith in the Prime Minister getting a good deal with 27 European Union governments when she can't even broker a deal within her own cabinet?
Stunning developments began last Friday at Chequers, the Prime Minister's country house, when May pitched her EU exit strategy to her cabinet. Any agreement there was shattered by Sunday. As the senior minister in charge of negotiating that exit, David Davis suddenly quit.
I'm worried that what the European Union will do is simply take what we've offered and ask for more or wait for more.
The two high-profile resignations weakened fragile negotiations and handed the opposition an opening.
Far from strong and stable, there are ministers overboard and the ship is listing, all at the worst possible time.
The Prime Minister apparently survived the brewing threat of a leadership coup for now. As Boris Johnson slipped out of his official residence late tonight without a word, leaving Britain's Brexit plan further muddled and in the hands of new Brexit and foreign secretaries.
And let's get some more from Susan in London. Let's look towards the March 2019 deadline and what needs to be done before then.
Yeah, that seems like a long time away, 8 months, but really the critical deadline facing the negotiators is less than 3 months away, Ian. October of this year, the EU summit where both Britain and the European Union are supposed to ratify a withdrawal deal. They're also supposed to come up with a basic political agreement on free trade and some kind of transition plan. That's an awful lot of work to do, and take summer holidays out of that, and you've got about 2 months for all that work, which may have worked in Theresa May's favor tonight, because no one had a huge appetite for blowing up the entire government with that deadline staring them in the face. Beyond that, the EU and British parliaments have to vote on the Brexit deal sometime early next year before this all is scheduled to come to pass at the end of March.
And I feel like we'll hear more from you on this from London in the next few days. Thanks, Susan.
Okay.
And global politics will be front and center at the NATO summit this week. Adrian, Canada is set to make a big announcement ahead of the meeting in Brussels.
You bet, Ian. This one about Latvia. That's where Justin Trudeau is tonight, set to extend Canada's contribution to NATO just before his next encounter with Donald Trump. The CBC's Catherine Cullen is in Latvia with more on what's in store.
One of the very first things that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will do on this trip is aimed at staving off criticism from Donald Trump. The U.S. president wants members of the NATO alliance, including Canada, to beef up their defense spending and do more to pull their weight.
They want to protect against Russia, yet they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and we're the schmucks that are paying for the whole thing.
And tomorrow, the Prime Minister will announce a new defense commitment. CBC News has learned that Canada will announce tomorrow that it's extending its leadership role in the NATO mission here in Latvia. Right now, there are 450 Canadian troops participating in Operation Reassurance, which is aimed at pushing back any potential Russian incursion into Latvia. And sources tell the CBC that that mission could be extended perhaps 3 years, perhaps beyond. But that still won't be enough to get Canada up to the levels that both NATO and Trump would like to see in terms of military spending. Now, on Wednesday in Belgium, Trump and Trudeau are likely to have their first face-to-face encounter since that G7 meeting in the Charlevoix. That is the one that ended with Trump tweeting that Trudeau was very weak and dishonest. Now, that tension was over trade, and of course the trade situation, the pressure there has only ratcheted up since then, with Canada introducing counter tariffs on U.S. goods. So how will the meeting go in Belgium? Well, last week the Prime Minister said of Donald Trump that he is someone who makes a virtue of unpredictability. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Riga.
So here's a little more about where the Prime Minister is. Latvia is a former Soviet state on the Baltic Sea. It shares a long land border with the Russian Federation, and that has a lot to do with why Canadian troops have been on the ground in the northeastern European country for the last year. Here's the brief.
That's what we're here to make sure is nothing happens. I think it's the definition of deterrence, is to dissuade someone from that wants to do something harmful or inappropriate from doing it.
NATO sent its troops there after Russia's annexation of Crimea more than 4 years ago. Since then, tensions in the Baltics have soared. There are some fears that Latvia could be annexed too.
It is important that Canadian troops and also other troops of NATO forces will send a very strong signal.
That signal to Russian troops: don't enter Latvian towns.
The alliance has decided to put in what will be very credible combat forces, not intended to attack, entirely defensive in nature.
Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, has criticized the NATO deployments in Eastern Europe as unnecessarily provocative, deepening the strain between Russia and the alliance.
Still ahead on The National, we'll take you to an unbirthday party, a special celebration for one Ontario girl. That's our moment of the day.
Ended up turning into like all these people wanting to give back to these children, and I ended up with 200 registered children from all over Ontario that had never been to a birthday party or had kids come to theirs. We had 200 kids there yesterday.
A reminder, you can always find great photos from the day's top stories and our reporters on our Instagram page. Today, the christening of Prince Louis, the newest royal edition, not counting Meghan Markle. Check us out at CBC The National.
taking on the electric 80s.
Oh my. Ooh, it's a lot of fake.
Oh.
They look horrible.
We can fix this. Ew.
This is a level of awesome I cannot even begin to explain.
Back in time for dinner. New episode Thursday at 8 on CBC.
Caitlin Coughlin turns 18 on Wednesday. Happy almost birthday, Caitlin. This weekend, she celebrated, but her party was a little bit different. Call it an unbirthday party. You see, Caitlin has Williams syndrome. That's a genetic disorder that can affect brain development, and she has struggled to make friends. Worried she'd be celebrating her milestone birthday all alone, but not this year. Her mom, Nicole, put out a call on social media asking friends and family to send cards and messages. That call turned into so much more. Parents started reaching out to Caitlin's mom with stories of their own kids who've also had a hard time. And so, a plan for a huge party. Caitlin's unbirthday is our moment of the day.
How do you feel about the last 6 months?
6 months? I'm awesome.
It's awesome. You feel awesome?
Yes, Mama.
I think if there's anything to be taken out of all this, it's Caitlin's self-worth has built up her confidence.
And I like the kids when I walk around and I talk to them. Oh, I loved it.
Even the city bus had come to pick her up from our house to bring her to the party. So that was like her limo to the party. It was from 12 to 4 p.m. and everybody stayed from 12 to 4. We had wonderful weather too. I ended up with 200 registered children from all over Ontario that had never been to a birthday party or had kids come to theirs.
See everyone have fun and stuff, hang out, make new friends, have fun.
Even though the theme was a birthday party, the whole goal was to connect children with each other and create friendship. So it worked.
Nicole, you are an amazing mom. Imagine worried about, whether your little one would have enough friends, and then suddenly she's surrounded by them. There's a plan, by the way, to take this unbirthday party all across this province.
Which is fantastic. As a parent, birthday parties for kids, at least, can be so fraught. Who do you invite? Will enough people come? It's just so nice when you see a community effort like that. I should point out there will be a surprise from the mom on Wednesday at the actual birthday, but she's not sharing what that is, so indeed it will be a surprise. So,
and we're not going to blow it.
I was going to say, we're not going to play the role of the spoiler there. That is the National for Monday, July 9th. Good night.